Bismillah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillah, Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran. We're going to start, guys, in this is the second, obviously, as you know, lesson that we're doing. And today we're going to be talking about metaphysics and the hard problem of consciousness. Now, before we continue with what we're doing today, it's important to recap what we've done last time, right? So let's do this, right? Inshallah, what you've got in front of you, you've written the learning objectives. I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to answer the following question. You're going to have that time. You're going to do it by yourselves. I'm not going to help you. You're going to write a question and you're going to write down the answer, yeah? And the question is, briefly outline, put this down. And at home, please, guys, if you are obviously following the first lesson, write the same question down. If not, at least try and verbalize an answer for yourselves internally, or just say it to yourself. Outline, or briefly outline, the three main schools of philosophical thought. So I want their names, okay? And the positions of each school. So I briefly outline the three main schools of philosophical thought, the ones that we've covered last lesson, right? And tell me what they say, basically. Yeah. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to write that down, and then we'll come back, have a feedback session, and we'll talk about what comes next. All right, now we're coming back and we're feeding back and we're relaying information, inshallah. So let's answer me the question: Who are the three main schools of philosophical thought? What are the three main schools of philosophical thought?
Okay, so we have materialism, dualism, and idealism.
Excellent. So can you tell me what each of those strands, what they believe, what a materialist would believe in, what a dualist would believe in, and what an idealist would believe in?
Yeah. So, checking my notes, materialism was using your five senses to come to truth. Anything that's not scientific is meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that is there's another thing. Can't remember.
Positivism.
No. There's another thing that's what I can remember anyway. There was another thing that says that it's meaningless as well.
Okay, yeah, no, you're right. Anything that's not empirically justified,
intangible.
Tangible, right? It's not meaningless. It's meaningless, yeah.
Meaningless.
Okay, good. What's dualism?
Dualism, if I'm not mistaken, is that they say the mind and the body is separate.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
What about idealism?
Idealism is that the thought process is on you.
Everything is.
Construct.
Everything is in your mind.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. Everything is mental construct. That's what Bishop Berkeley and others would contend. Yeah. Did you want to add to it?
No, he's mentioned pretty much everything.
Okay, good. You said something about positivism. Do you want to add to it?
Positivism is a strand of materialism.
Yeah. Okay. So so what did we say about positivism last session?
If it can't be proven empirically, then it's meaningless.
What's the word for proven empirically that we used?
Epistemology?
That begins with V.
Verified.
Yes. Okay. So what is this principle?
Verify using our five senses.
Verification.
Verificationism. Yeah. Put an ism at the end of it, you get the idea, right?
What?
Yeah. And what happened to verificationism in the 1920s and 30s?
Yeah,
What happened with it, with verificationism? Was it a successful strand of philosophical?
They had a problem, but I can't remember what the problem was. They came to a realization. I think was it the problem of consciousness came in?
You're on the right lines for sure. For sure, you're on the right lines. What is the problem with saying? Okay, this is. Let me ask the question, right? What's the problem with saying that anything outside of the five senses is meaningless?
So then you negate the mathematics.
For example, right?
Yeah.
Why?
Because mathematics is untouchable. And
Okay.
they say anything that's untouchable is meaningless. If it's meaningless, how do you use mathematics?
What other questions did people have? Not just mathematics, but something else.
The hard problem of consciousness.
Consciousness is something which we're going to talk about today. Ethics, excellent. Yeah. So these are things which are intangibles.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not tangible, but which to the majority of people exist,
Yeah.
and which can't be denied. Even more profound is that the system of science, the method of science, the scientific method, is itself a metaphysical construct, is itself based on logical principles. Because principles like falsificationism, verificationism, these principles are themselves not tangible, are they?
Deduction and induction.
Yeah, we're going to come to that in the third session, all right? But these things are themselves not tangible. So if you say that everything that's not tangible is meaningless,
For science in the bin.
well, put the scientific method in the bin, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And so you're supporting it's irony, right? It's a circular argument, in a sense. Do you understand how that works?
Yeah, it is actually, because they're saying the whole point is anything that's unscientific is meaningless,
Mhm.
but then you're doing the same thing with science.
Okay, why? Go, expand that point.
Because they're saying anything that's not scientific is untangible,
Yeah.
but then the scientific method is based on something that's intangible.
Perfect, yeah? Excellent. All right, today we're going to be honing in on the hard problem of consciousness. We kind of talked about in the previous session, as you said. The hard problem of consciousness is something which has plagued much, the materialists in a sense, and it's something which there's a heavy debate on, which we're going to talk about and try and simplify in the easiest ways possible. 3 learning objectives today, which you've, inshallah, written down. Number 1 is to know the main contentions against materialism. Okay, so what are the main arguments against this materialism? And we've already kind of established some of those in the previous session. So this is kind of linking into the previous session, right? Number 2, to understand the hard problem of consciousness. We've already discussed the hard problem of consciousness. We've already talked about some of the issues regarding consciousness. But we want to go into detail with this in a bit more, right? Number 3 is to make a judgment on materialist claims regarding reality. These are the 3 learning objectives, okay? These are the 3 learning objectives. Now, let's start with the first one. We've already talked about, if you have a materialist, right? I'm going to ask a question. If you have a materialist, someone who's a materialist, and says, look, I don't believe that anything which is above and beyond the 5 senses has any meaning, okay? In bullet point form, write down 3 arguments you'd put against them, okay? Whilst I put something on the board, okay?
Sorry, does this include things that you can measure with an instrument?
Pardon?
Does this include things you can measure with an instrument?
What do you mean?
For instance, like electromagnetic waves.
I think you could talk about quantum mechanics, but try and use that language. Okay. So what would you say, Ali?
Me personally, the 3 arguments that I would use is mathematics, science, and consciousness. You have to reject all these 3.
Okay, so if I come to you and say, look, for instance, you say we're having a theological discussion, yeah? Say we're having a theological discussion, and you say you're a theologian, or you're a theist, sorry, yeah? And you believe in God, yeah? And I say to you, no, look, I don't personally believe. I say, this is my perspective, I don't believe in anything that can't be verified empirically.
So I would say then there's a fallacy in your argument, because if you go with that argument, the scientific method is based on that.
Mm-hmm.
Mathematics is
It's based on what?
What did you say?
Something which can't be verified empirically.
Yeah, empirically. So for example, you cannot empirically use science. Yeah?
What do you mean?
Like science, the scientific method is intangible.
Okay, so it's not physical, is it?
Yeah, so therefore you can't use science.
Okay.
You can't come to the scientific truths that you base your life on. Mathematics is the same. You can't do it because it's intangible. It's
Mm-hmm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not physical. and then your consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness. So
Which
I
we're
would
going to
say-
come to, right?
You're going to come to. So I would say all these three, you can't use your thought process because
Mhm.
it's intangible.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't use your thought process, you can't use science. If you can't use science, you can't use maths. All three interlink because science uses maths, and to use maths and science, you need your brain.
Okay.
Consciousness. So I would, that's
Well, we'll talk about the brain, but you're certainly on the right track, and that is a correct argument for sure, yeah? Haidar, is there something you want to add to it?
Yeah, I'd like to add quotations, what you can't sense.
Okay.
So things that are outside your realms of sensing as a human being,
Such as?
such as, for instance, bees and other insects, they can sense chemicals in the air, or they can see different colors.
Right.
But our human faculties are limited, so
Right,
we
right,
can't
right.
experience what they
Yeah, good point. So empiricism is kind of based on the one who is conducting the experiment, is what you're saying. That's a very good point.
also like frequency, like sound frequency.
Yeah, so you're limited by your instruments, both your human instruments and the scientific instruments. And there's a whole discussion in quantum mechanics on this, because quantum mechanics is where instruments cannot see, we cannot actually see what's going on underneath the subatomic world. So it's all kinds of assumptions going on there. And there's a whole discussion on that. So that's absolutely correct. Well done. Yeah.
You're also assuming that you're the most complex and most superior creation can be.
That could be argued, but you're definitely on the right track. Okay, the hard problem of consciousness is called the hard problem of consciousness. It's because, from a physicalist perspective, and what did we say physicalism was?
Something that's tangible.
Physicalism is a synonym for. You can be used interchangeably for another word, which is begins with M that we talked about today.
Materialism.
Materialism. When I say physicalism, I mean materialism.
Oh, this
And when I say materialism, I mean physicalism. Yeah,
okay.
they're the same thing, because it refers to that which is physical. So a physicalist would say, when we ask them the question, okay, who are you? Where is the mind? What is the mind? They will answer in a physicalist way. They will answer in a materialist way. So they will either say, the mind is the brain. There is no difference at all between the mind and the brain. Just before we continue, what would you see are some of the issues with making a claim like that?
That's very interesting because the thing is, before we came to this class, you sent us 2 articles to read. I read one of them and it was quite interesting. It was saying if we had a copy of ourselves without the conscious, and we was thinking of the like physical, because they try to solve the problem of hard consciousness. We're saying it's our physical body, it's the brain, etc. But if the brain is there and we have another copy of ourselves, it would have no value because it would not able to be operated. It would never be us. It would never be.
You're definitely on the right track. Yeah.
I read something. I don't know if it links. But
No, it does link.
I found it quite
We're going to come to the conceivability argument. Do you want to add to it?
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, if someone says you are your brain, yourself and your brain are one and the same thing. Your mind and your brain are one and the same thing. How would you disprove this theory?
Yeah, it links. It links to what I said then. Yeah, that was
Yep.
what I said. So this is what I read. Imagine me, another of me, yeah, on this table, but is not alive. Yeah, because if they're saying the brain is you and you are the brain, then that person cannot. It's not going to operate. It's not alive. So there's a difference between me and him. Do you get it?
Mm-hmm.
You can touch up on it, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
So if I
that
didn't
makes
confuse you,
sense.
yeah.
Okay, good. I think you guys are on the right track, but let me just try and steer you to 2 main philosophical arguments that have traditionally been made. And this is what's happened in the contemporary world. There's 2 major arguments. One is called the knowledge argument, and the other one's called the conceivability argument. Okay, the knowledge argument, Jackson popularized this, and he said that, look, imagine if you have a person called Mary. Yeah, you have a woman called Mary, and she lives in a world. She lives in a room, and everything is black and white. Everything in the room is black and white. Now, her reality is black and white. So everything that she could see, and this links back to what you were saying, Haider, in a sense, everything that she knew from her person was black and white. As soon as she left the room, she saw a red
Strawberry.
tomato.
Oh, tomato.
Yeah, she saw a red tomato. So, for the first time ever, she was introduced to a red tomato. The fact that she wasn't introduced to that red tomato before doesn't mean that that red tomato didn't exist or the color red didn't exist.
Okay.
Okay? It's the idea of عدم الدليل ليس دليل على عدم. It's like the lack of evidence doesn't mean that there is no this is false. I think it's false. The point that's being made with this argument is that we are confined to a real world of tangible things. We can't see certain things, and therefore we assume that those things don't exist. It's pretty straightforward argument. However, to be completely fair, Jackson himself, from what I've read, he kind of takes it back afterwards because it's not a very watertight argument. So today I'm not going to focus on this argument because I don't think it's a watertight argument. I could see myself many counters to this argument. It's not a very strong argument. Okay, so we're going to cross it out in a sense, but it's good to know that it exists. The conceivability argument, also known as the zombie argument or zombie philosophy or things like that, is the idea that, think of this, is it possible to conceive, and this is more like a thought experiment, is it possible to conceive that we have a replica or a human being, everything is in that human being, but that they have no conscious, they have no consciousness. So recently this has been adjusted. Me and Hamza had a conversation, there's a video on it, and me and Faraz had a conversation with this, and there's a video on that as well. We adjusted it to kind of robots. So let's say, for instance, and this is for us, put it this way, and I think it's a very good way of putting it, yeah? Say, for instance, we make a replica of Ali. We make a replica, a physical replica of Ali, such that all of the material constituent parts that make Ali Dawah today are made in a clone form. Okay, so everything physical, your brain, your hair, your heart, everything physical about you, we clone it to the letter, yeah, in a genetic formatting that is completely precise, 100%. Or we have a Haidar 2.0. Everything about Haidar is 100% cloned. Okay.
That'll be interesting.
Is that other person you?
Well, if you...
Is that other thing, is that Haidar 2.0 you, or is that Ali 2.0 you? Yes or no?
Okay, so
Think about it.
Say is that your consciousness is a product of all the different neuronal links made in your brain.
That's what a materialist would say.
Yeah.
So, but I guess what they would like in a spiritual sense is your soul.
Yeah, but you can't just say that you believe in a soul. We're looking at it philosophically, right?
They reject that. No, they say it's your brain. What you call soul is your brain. If your brain dies,
Yeah.
you die.
What I'm saying right now, if we made a clone of Ali Dawah,
It's not me.
it's not you. Everything about it is completely cloned. Everything to the letter is completely cloned, but it's not you.
It looks exactly like me.
Yes.
But the inner aspect of it is not me.
Okay. Even if I kill this thing,
Yeah.
it's a robot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I committing murder?
No.
Why not? Explain.
No, why not? Because it's not alive. It's not conscious. It's not here. It might be here with a physical body, but it's not here.
It's important at this stage to understand what is consciousness. In the dictionary definition, being conscious, it could just be, say, a state of awareness. Okay, so you can put this down. Consciousness, from a vernacular perspective, is like a state of general awareness. But from a philosophical perspective, we're talking about a first-person, subjective experience. And remember, we talked about this before. A first-person, subjective experience, we're talking about how we feel, how we see things, how we interact. These are the questions, right? Now, we cannot assume that robot will have that intuition. Yeah, that computers have consciousness, right? We cannot assume that computers have feeling, that they have first-person subjective experiences. So the thing that separates you from that robot, Ali Dawah, that Ali Dawah 2.0, is that robot does not have first-person subjective experiences. And we cannot assume that that robot has first-person subjective experiences. Another point to be noted is this, is that if we're saying that we are our brains, and our brains and us are one and the same thing, then it's clear, scientifically we know, that our cells are always replaced. Our cells are always replaced. So your brain today is not your brain 10 years from now. So if you were your brain, you are not today who you were 10 years ago. Physically, yourself has changed. But let's go back, and this is something which interestingly has been written about, and this is a book you can refer to. Very good book written by Raymond Tallis. It's called Aping Mankind. It's a book which really hammers this point home and he is an expert scientist and an expert philosopher, so he holds both kind of credentials and has worked in the field for many years. And his point is that it's not possible. Sorry, there's a bit of profanity in this thing. he says it's not possible. This guy Raymond Tallis, he says it's not possible, right? He makes the point that it's not possible for our brains to be ourselves, and he makes a whole host of arguments which you can read. Here's a smaller book here, a smaller book as well, which is written. Small arguments can easily be more easily succinctly summarized in this book. In this book here, I've just come across that book quite recently. The first one's called Aping Mankind. This one, so it's called The Kingdom of Infinite Space.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've just come across it quite recently, actually, to be honest with you. Anyways, so the point we're making here is that it's not conceivable that if we have an Ali 2.0, that Ali 2.0 will be, alive in the same way that you're alive, and conscious in the same way that you're conscious, having the same first-person subjective experiences as you do. But then when we conceive of it like that, the question is, so where did this consciousness come from? If we can't if we cannot instill consciousness into things. So for example, if we want to make an Ali 2.0 with exactly the same mechanics and the same aesthetics and the same functions even the way it acts is the same as you. We've programmed it to the T, right? But it doesn't have that missing ingredient. What is that missing ingredient, and can it be obtained physically? Is there an ingredient called consciousness, a physical ingredient called consciousness, that we can somehow obtain? Because the answer has always been no. Why? By nature of the fact that consciousness is a first-person subjective experience, and science is third person. This is very profound. If consciousness is first person, and science is third person, they can never be one. Science can never track and be consciousness, and consciousness can never be science or scientific. They are separate from one another, which is why there's a need to discuss consciousness philosophically, not scientifically, because it's gone out of the question of how now. The question is now becoming, why do we have consciousness? So these are all questions. What I want you to do now is I want you to write with what I've just said, a small paragraph, what is the hard problem of consciousness? And what I want you to do, referring to it, is talking about the problem materialists have defining consciousness materialistically. Why is it problematic to define consciousness in terms of the physical world around us, bearing in mind what I've just said? Yeah? You've got 5 minutes to write this, and then we'll talk after that. Go on, so tell me. No, because I saw the dumbbell, the 2 kilogram dumbbell, but... Anyways, yes.
I was doing concentration. Okay, so basically...
Let's start with Haidar, please.
Okay, so what I've got is consciousness cannot be quantified, as consciousness is a first-person experience. All peoples experience consciousness on a subjective level. Materialists make a third-person argument that is based on a collective understanding on a non-subjective matter that requires a physical interaction.
Excellent. Well done.
That's quite interesting, actually. You answered my question of
It's very good.
first-person experience and a third-person experience. So what we're saying is scientists are trying to give an understanding when they're not in it.
Well, science works in the third person. Remember, you're always doing something.
Okay.
Science, you're doing an experiment to something. Okay? You're doing an experiment to something.
Okay.
That interaction is like it, right? That's third person.
Yes.
It's not I.
Yes.
I is me. Yeah? You can't say that's science. That's no longer science. Okay? Go ahead. So, is there anything you want to... Do you want to add to it? Read out your one, please.
There's nothing I've had. Well, to be honest, I just wrote materialists are in a dilemma with this problem, like, the hard problem of consciousness. And to say that if you make an exact copy of me, it is me, it's totally wrong. If my brain is my conscious, then when my brain cells renew itself, I should become a different person. Just one of that.
Okay, that's another angle. That's very good. Okay. Now, guys, we're not going to spend too much time because we do have another session on this, right? Another session coming up. The point is this. We started off by talking about metaphysics and the hard problem of consciousness, okay? And bring this back to what we do, right? As having discussions on theology with people of different religions, and especially atheists, etc. And our theme, our organizational theme of deconstruction and then reconstruction, yeah? Because this is effectively what we're actually doing, right? They will come with, or some people will come with certain absolutist claims, which we can now, I believe, deconstruct. So the absolutist claims is that, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, right? Or if I can't verify it, it's meaningless. Those claims are now easily deconstructed. And by the way, they have very low currency in the world of philosophy. They have very low currency now. Yeah, we're able to do that. Consciousness is interesting because it shows something metaphysical which is happening to us on a daily basis, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So with that, I am going to conclude this episode. Okay, this lesson. This is the first lesson. We've made it abbreviated so that it's easy for consumption. And what now you can be able to see is that you can make a judgment on the materialist claims, some of the contentions that they've done, so that we've actually achieved our learning objectives.
I do believe the word consumption has a negative connotation to it. If we can use something else, it would be quite...
No problem, we'll do that after I consume coffee and have a break. And guys at home, you can have a break as well, because we're going to be going to the third and final episode of critical thinking. It's going to be about truth and falsehood and probability. Inshallah, join us for the next episode.